Thank you very much. Thank you all and thank you for the good presentation of what openIMIS is. I also put 3 slides to present openIMIS. I will not go through all of them. That was already presented by our president, 2 speakers. But what I want also to enhance that openIMIS is used in lots of countries. So Nepal is one of the biggest implementation, as it was mentioned. But there are other implementation which are running around the world, mainly in African and countries. And there are lots of other countries and insurance implementation that are interested actually to use openIMIS for their management. Also, openIMIS comes from open source insurance management information system. So as was mentioned before, it's an open source solution to manage insurance and social protection scheme. One also I want to emphasize is the different workflows that were presented to, but very quickly here we have the 4 workflows which openIMIS is managing. So the enrollment, where the beneficiary, the insuree, and their families are enrolled within a scheme, as it was explained before. The health services, where the insurers go to the hospital and receive medical services, so the patient treatment. Ending with the claim entry, the claim management within the insurance. In the case of Nepal, will be the Health Insurance Board and SSF, where they will review the claims and will approve the payments. And of course, the last workflow is the reporting and monitoring. It was also mentioned about the AI-based claim adjudication work that I'm part of the team working on this module, and, which was also presented yesterday during the artificial intelligence workshop in Nepal. So basically, the DRG are linked within the health services and claim management, and within openIMIS, those are grouped and bundled within what we call a claim. So now going to the openIMIS data model. So it was presented a claim view page where we have different sections. So we have the section about the generic information of the claim, the services that were offered, and the medical items. So here we can see where the which was the health facility, where the patient went for the specific treatment, who was the claim administrator, so the person who entered the claim within the system, who was the insuree, so the person, the patient, the name and the insuree number, the visits times, so from date to date, when it was actually submitted to the insurance, the diagnosis, we'll see more in details with the tables just after this slide, the ID of the claim. There are different diagnoses, so we'll see. So there are 1 main diagnosis and 4 secondary diagnoses here. And of course, for all the items and services, there are a quantity linked and a price. And after the review of the claim will be an approved quantity. So if the medical officer who reviews the claim thinks the quantity is too much or doesn't make sense, can correct that quantity by reducing the value, and also the approved price. So if the price requested by the hospital is not exactly the one which was approved with the insurance, so you can also modify the price. There are also fields for the explanation justification. They're saying why the hospital will explain why this medical service has been provided. So per service and items, there's also 1 explanation per claim as a group. So why this claim has been provided. So and then a justification, which is actually the one coming from the insurance. So justification is Nepal Health Insurance Board or the SSF will justify why it was the changes made. For example, there was some rejection reason. So we have the status, passed or rejected. And one of the rejection reason will be like the one of the document missing from the attachment. So this is to be justified as a free text, the document is missing. So we request to resubmit the claim with the right document. So this is the main claim view page. that is shown to the end users, but behind the scene there is a data model. So openIMIS is using for the moment an SQL Server database. We are in the migration phase where openIMIS is moving from Microsoft technology to open source technologies. So Eric, who is here with us, is leading the team who does the migration to the modular version using open source technology, Python with Django and JavaScript with React. And the database will move in the next month to PostgreSQL. So the presentation will be shared. There are some links in the presentation. You can directly go because it's an open source solution. You can access the database structures and database with a demo data set on GitHub. So as I mentioned, because there are two versions of openIMIS, there are 67 tables which comes from SQL script, which so it was maintained as SQL script in the GitHub from the legacy version developed with the Microsoft technologies, and now with the new version from the migration. Actually, the data models are managed by the code, so Django code, and through migration, some tables are created. So 67 tables are in the SQL script, and 102 tables actually are created when installing the new version of openIMIS. That's just for having an idea of number of tables. But here on the right side, you can see partial structure is small, so don't worry about this. Next slide will present each of the main tables. But here just to see, basically starting from claim, TBL claim, so this is the name of the tables. So only part of the SQL script, so from the GitHub, all these tables not generated by Django migration, so it's easy to access. And a diagram generated by SQL Server Management Studio. So if you want to generate this kind of diagram for you to easily access and understand different fields and relationship, you can install SQL Server Express, which is free, with SQL Server Management Studio, and actually create a database with the demo data set. So for you to have also examples. But to get back, so as I mentioned, the claim is for us what is the main grouping or bundle for medical services and items, and this is the main component, I would say, which is related to the DRGs. So starting from this element, this entity, actually, what I did here is just to getting all the relationship for several levels. So for the claim, we can see we have an issuee, we have services and items linked to a claim. We have the diagnosis. So this is the table ICD codes. We have the facility where the claim has been submitted from. And then on the different levels, an issuee have some information about the gender, different information, relationship, profession, what the family is part of, which policy has, which policy one, so will be an instance of insurance product. Okay, now going into more details. So here the claim model. So you have in the title so the link to the wiki pages. So there are wiki pages explaining these models, these tables. So here the direct links from starting from one level relationship from table claim. Here we can also see that's mentioned. So I didn't put all the from relationship here, but here you have all the links from table claim and also links to the tables created by the modular version through migration. So claim mutation, for example, is coming from the new modular version, and claim attachment. But here, so this diagram, you will find it in the wiki of openIMIS through the link you'll find in the title of the slide. But to go into details of the claim model, so here you have the fields from the claim model, which are part of the table. For the slide here, I remove a few of the fields which were not important for this presentation. So there are some fields used for the auditing part of openIMIS. But if you go to the wiki page, you will find them too there. So it will be the full table there. And of course, if you actually look into the actual SQL script, creating the the database structure, you'll have all the fields there. But just getting to this table, so you have an ID for the claim. So there will be two IDs, so one private key and then the UID, so which I remove it from here, which is not important. Just for the presentation, you have the insurer ID, the private foreign key to the which insurer the claim is created for. Each claim has a code, the date from to when the starting date and date of the medical services. ICD IDs. So this is important here. So ICD ID, so that's a foreign key to ICD code table. So this is the main diagnosis. And if you see at the end of the table, you have additional 4 ICD IDs, meaning you have 4 additional diagnoses that can be added to the main diagnosis. None of the implementation I know about using all of the diagnoses. The Nepali implementation, they are using 2 diagnoses, so the main diagnosis and the ICD-ID-1 diagnosis, so only 2 levels, but none of the implementation until now are using all the 5 levels. Also, the name of the field ICD-ID, actually, it was historically it was developed and implemented in Tanzania, and they were using ICD codes for the diagnosis. And this is why the names were chosen in the beginning as ICD instead of calling that generic diagnosis. And but that can match, so any implementation can add whatever list of diagnoses they need to provide their services. There are other fields, so claim status, what was claimed, the total amount of claims. So you have all the information here. So the type of the fields, is mandatory or not, if there is a default value, and explanations there. So there are fields that are provided by the hospital. There are some calculations which and automatic checks, which is created here. For example, date processed. So it's an automatic process after the reviewing of the claim by medical officer, where the calculation of the approved amount is done, which might not be linked to DRGs, but you have all the information here in this table. Moving to the injury model, so the table injury, you have the links to different information about the injury, the gender. So the gender, it's an external table because openIMIS allows to have different gender types. And also to manage translations, there is these tables on the left because there are 2 languages. So the main language and another language. By default is English and French. Relation, identification types, so all this information about the insurees. With the family, what is the family which the insuree is. Here you see 2 foreign keys actually in both sense because you have the insuree part of the family, but also the family has a head of the family, which is another insuree. So this is why there are 2 links into this. There will be a policy for each insuree. The claims which are provided created submitted by for each insuree, the whole facility. So this is the first point of service, and this link actually was created for Nepal because none of the other implementation are using the first point of service feature. And then other information about renewal of policies and some deductibles based on claims submitted. More in details, so we have here all the fields. Again, removed all the fields for the auditing because of the size of the table. But the most important fields here, you have the insuree number, CHF ID. Again, the naming of the field is basically historical from Tanzania because the scheme is called CHF. The last name, other names, so the names, date of birth, the gender, which is a foreign key here in our case. The marital status we saw in the DRG. There is also marital status, but it's not not important for what we need maybe. Is head is the head of the family. And then there are these relationships with so you have on the explanation of the relationships the default value from the demo and the default installation of the openIMIS data database, just for you to understand what are those fields means. Going to medical services, so these are the what we call master data configuration. So before starting actually submitting claims, we need to define the medical services and medical items. It's about defining the code of the service and a name, what is the types, what is the level of the service, and the price, and also the frequency. So here, and for who is valid. So patient category, self patcat, so patient category, actually, it's a binary encoded field, which actually say if the service is valid for children, an adult, a woman, or a man. So a binary coded value. The medical items is almost the same. So it's the same. The only thing the service has a service category, which an item doesn't have a category. So, but if not, are the same structures. Then you have the claim service and claim item. So, as I mentioned, medical item and service are the generic configuration of an available service and items. And claim service and claim item, actually, there is a usage of the service and item within a claim. So there is this link through the claim services. And here actually where the information about the quantity and price asked, it's mentioned. So by the hospital and claim administrator, when introduce a claim and adding a service, they will provide the quantity and the price. By default, so each health facility in openIMIS has defined a price list. It's not part of the list here, but the price list is actually the negotiated prices within between the insurance and the health facilities that will be applied when submitting claims. So by default, the price asked will be the one from the price list, but that can be also changed. And then there are all the other fields which are actually basically related to the workflow of a claim. So the approval status, what was approved by the medical officers, was the price evaluated, depending on the scheme type. So if it is fee for service or capitation, the evaluation is not based on the same calculation rules. The explanation, justification, what was, why it was submitted, and why it was, for example, rejected, justification, rejection reason. If it, as I mentioned before, there is several levels. So it's an automatic rule engine which checks a claim just when it is submitted. And if it is rejected, there is a rejection reason which is given. But it's also for the new artificial intelligence model, the also rejection reason which is given that it was rejected by the artificial intelligence model. And of course, there are other fields which are actually automatically and used for the calculation, which is to see if are related actually to the DRGs. Medical items, so the same structure as the medical services. You have more information here, but it's applying between the same. So if you go to the link on the wiki page, you'll have the full list, for example, of the rejection reasons that is given by the rule engine check if it was the item or services are rejected. So for example, item service is not in the register of medical item or services, meaning the health facility will send a claim with a service which is not actually existing within the insurance, is not configured within openIMIS, just as an example. Moving to the diagnosis. So this is maybe an important table, but it's not so evolved in openIMIS. So in openIMIS, diagnosis actually is just an element, an entity which defines a code and a name. Here actually you have the full table because it was enough space on the slide, so I could leave the full table. So you can see here also the auditing values or fields, variety from variety to, and different information because every time there is a modification, there is a record which is created to keep track of the changes and who did the changes. But getting back to the diagnosis, so each diagnosis actually is defined by a code and the name. And health facilities. So health facilities are the one where the patient goes for treatments. The different links. So health facility has multiple claim administrators. So the claim administrator is a personnel from the health facility who can submit claims. So the claim administrator, they will enter the claims and then will submit. Also, as an information, the openIMIS has different components which can be used by the end user. So there is a web application is working on within a browser, but there are also two mobile applications. So there is an enrollment mobile application which is called Policies, and there is a claiming mobile application which is used to submit claims. So the difference is that the mobile application are also work offline in case of the hospital doesn't have access to the internet. So those claim administrators can use any of the components to submit claims to web application or mobile application. Health facilities, so we'll have defined one price list for services and one price list for items, as explained before. They will be valid, so we'll have a location in a catchment area, so who will be the population who can go to that health facility. And of course, all the insuries which have the first point of service that health facilities and all the claims which are submitted for those health facilities. So the explanation of the fields from the table. So you have different foreign keys here with the values of legal forms, different facility levels, hospital center, dispensary, the sub-levels. You have the location ID, basically limited to the district level. Information on location, the location in openIMIS are configured on 4 levels, so region, district, municipality, and village. There is only one table within the database which use the composition pattern. So if you look on the database, you'll only see one table for locations, and basically there is a value saying if it is which kind of level is between the 4 I mentioned, and also who's the parent location for that specific location. For example, the district for a village. Information on contact, price list, and in account code, for example. There is here some links in the presentation which will be shared. So there is a openIMIS demo instance that can be accessed and tested. So if you want to see how it's working, you can use the demo instance for that. There is a database script available on GitHub. It's the same link as in previous slide. But there is a continuous integration script which every time we merge a pull request, the different single script, atomic script for the structure, for the views, for the data set are combined in one complete script. So you have the link of the combined SQL script for the latest release. So latest release is done in April this year. So from that is a zip file you can so uncompress, and there is different files. One which is called full demo database SQL file. So if you want to actually look into the database model directly within SQL Server, you can actually run this full demo database script to create the database and to see what's behind the scene. And then the partial table documentation in openIMIS Wiki. So this is so one wiki page with combined links to the tables explanation I just gave before. You can go on the wiki page there and see the complete documentation. So I hope that will help you to actually advance with the mapping between openIMIS and DRG. That will be all from my side. I know, Eric, do you have anything else maybe to add?
Not related to what you detailed here. Maybe if you can just leave me to share something. So there's also an overview that I'll add to the list that you've shown. So you had the full details here, and so also made a simplified schema showing the relation between the various tables that we have here. So also something to specify is that these tables have been defined in the original openIMIS design. They have been evolving since so now with Nepal and with the other implementation that we had of openIMIS. So we Bluesquare have been rewriting the software to use a modular architecture. So the colors that you see on the screen are different modules, so that you can easily replace or adapt one of the modules and have some specific behaviors in each of them or specific data. But these have been kept mostly the same as we had, so they have just been adapted. So as you said, we have now migrations that allows you to move slowly from version to version and not have to rewrite your table script so every time. So the scripts that you have here will generate this, and then it will be slightly adapted by the software itself. So also on the support for the coming days, depending on the availability of each of the teams during these days, you will be in contact with Dragos or the SwissTPH team, or myself and our team. So SwissTPH is handling some of the development, the QA, the handling of the support and general management of the software itself, and some new developments as well, and as well as some implementations. And Bluesquare is has been doing the rewrites that we are now getting to close to an end, and doing also some implementations. So you will be in contact with some of us depending on what your questions are and to what is the availability of each. So that's all I had to add.